Hi guys, and welcome to my review for the ZIIGAAT Cinno. This is the second IM belonging to the Z Plus series from ZIIGAAT, but this time around, instead of a single dynamic like the Nuo, this is a 1+4 hybrid. It's got a 10mm LCP driver with 4 BAs handling the mids and the highs, 2 on the mids and 2 on the highs. And well, let me just quickly take you to the box, which is really simple. I mean, it says basic as can possibly be, very much like the Nuo. Open it up. This slides out. The IMs came over there. Brings some tips which are exactly the same as the tips found on the Nuo, which are neither great or bad. They are what they are. I think it's one area that perhaps ZIIGAAT should consider improving. Because the tips really do not do it justice. And then let me just quickly, the cable is this cable, yes. And then this is the Nuo. This is the cable that the Cinno brings. It's basically very similar to the one on the Nuo, but it's just got a nice finish. It's got a different color as well. I can't really. This looks like a very dark green color, and it doesn't tangle as easily. But again, the cable is perhaps not the best, I would say. Anyway, as for the IM itself, very much like the Nuo, it's a very small IM, especially when you consider it's a 1+4. But it's a very tastefully done IM. At least in that aspect, I have to give it to them. It's a small shell, fair enough, but it's got this nice gloss finish to it. You know, you can kind of look inside and see what's going on, but very in a very you know, very basic manner. You can't really see the shell inside very well. You can get kind of some glimpses of what's going on if you shine a light. I'm not using obviously the standard cable. I'm using a NiceHCK cable, and the tips I'm using are the tips which I usually get from PENON, which is either these tips, which have got this green stem as you can see, or then the KB07s. But in this particular case, these ones actually were the ones that worked best. The nice thing about being a nice small IM like this is it fits beautifully. Absolutely no issues with the fit. Fits really nice. It kind of disappears inside of my ears. Nothing protrudes. It really sits nicely. It's not a heavy IM as well, so it's not going to be hindered by fatigue in terms of, you know, weight or something pulling on the cable or anything of the sort. Anyway, in terms of its hardware, it's fine. It scores the let's say full marks, if you want to consider it that way, in terms of its build and how it fits nicely in the ear and so on. Fair enough. For $99, which is the price that it costs, I would have liked to have seen slightly better or improved tips, and as well a slightly better cable. It can be done, and I'm sure that ZIIGAAT could have done it. Anyway, that's that part of this review done, the hardware part. What did I select here to compare with the Cinno? Well, I was obviously going to try and select hybrids, 1+4 preferably, but I also wanted to try and keep things within more or less the same price range. So I've got on this side here the EPZ K5, the most expensive at $114. Okay, next to that the SiMGOT EM6L at $109. Then obviously the Cinno at $99. Next to that the NiceHCK NX7 Mk4, which it's not a 1+4, as it's got as well the PZT driver. But you can get this IM now for $99, and I think it's an IM that, maybe because the previous versions were not ideally tuned, or rather they showcased some negative aspects of the PZT or the piezos. This one maybe went a little bit under the radar and didn't get the deserved attention that it should have gotten, but it is a great IM. The reality is that this is a great IM. It comes very well accessorized in terms of tips and case and everything, so obviously I had to have this one here because, you know, I just thought it would be an interesting one to compare with. And then finally, on the left hand side, I've got the Rhapsody, the CCA Rhapsody, for $50, which is 2 DDs and 4 BAs. So one DD is running the bass, one DD is running the mids, and then the 4 BAs are running the highs basically. And the reason why I've got 2 is, well, first of all, because I like to confirm quality control whenever it's possible. I am happy to report, as I did before, with regards to the Rhapsody, perfect. I've actually got 3 sets, and they're all measured within 1.5 dBs of each other. And because they measured so closely to each other, what I actually did was I set this one up to have all the switches up, and this one to have the 2 first switches up and the other 2 down. And what basically that means is that then this one will have more mid bass. Okay, and also slightly changes the past pinna gain way that it slopes, while this one has a more tucked bass, basically tucking at 200 Hertz, and then the pinna gain after the peak is a little bit more accentuated. So you will get 2 very distinct sounds. You will get a sound here on this one, which is maybe a little bit mid bass shy, but very clean in the upper mid range, in the mids, upper mids, and treble. Very clean, very detailed. While this one, although it's got a little bit more energy in the mids, upper mids, and treble, it's also got a little bit more mid bass. So it's a little bit more engaging, but that engagement and that extra energy that it has in the mid bass actually compensates some slight, not harshness, not aggressiveness, but it gets a little bit energetic sometimes in that 3, 4, 5, 6K area. And so gladly the having that a bit extra of bass, yeah, does help. And that's basically let's say the opponents I chose here for the Cinno. So what is the sound of the Cinno? The Cinno has got a warm signature. It's got very nicely executed bass, very nice. The bass, both in terms of its sub bass and mid bass impact, it's perfect. But then the way that the pinna gain is done is a little bit relaxed initially, and then it peaks later on. It peaks at around more towards the 3K areas when it starts rising. So you've got a slight recess, especially more noticeable on the female vocals, which lose a little bit of energy or forwardness, which sometimes is welcomed, and then overall makes the sound just a little bit more on the warmer side. Although graphically, when I show you the graphs, you will see that it seems like it's got loads of extension and everything. It is noticeably darker sounding than the rest of the IEMs that are here. Okay, the mids, like I said, slightly recessed, but overall very nice, very correct. If there's one thing that the Cinno does have very nice, it's its correctness in terms of timbre and tonality. Surprisingly, very nice. Be it both vocals and instruments, they all, male vocals sound like male vocals, female vocals sound like female vocals, like they should sound. Although, like I said, just that slight little recess sometimes, a little bit overly laid back on the female vocals. But in terms then of instruments, it's perfect. Be it wind instruments or brass instruments or guitars, it just sounds very, very correct. Nothing there that can be pointed at as a negative. The extension, like I mentioned, it's got good extension, although I would have liked to have seen just a little bit more energy up top, which is surprising because when you look at the graph, it seems like it does have that energy. Anyway, in terms then of its technicalities, like I mentioned, timbre and tonality definitely is one of the one, if not the strongest aspect of the Cinno. The soundstage, it's correct, although it's kind of a smaller soundstage, not as large sounding as some of the other IEMs here. Although the good thing, or on a more positive note with regards to the soundstage being small, is that it actually is very correct. It's very realistic, while maybe on some IEMs here, namely the NX7 and to a certain extent the Rhapsody as well, does suffer that slight issue, is sometimes it is artificially big. Okay. Detailed retrieval, it's okay. I would have liked a little bit more, but it's okay. It's not non-offensive as well, and resolution as well, decent. Nothing that I mean, detailed retrieval and resolution, I would have liked a little bit more. There's a good ability to differentiate between things, but a little bit more would have been welcomed. And why do I say that to a certain extent? Because as well, the bass, although it sounds very relaxed graphically, or it looks very relaxed graphically, it actually has got a lot more energy than what it graphs like. And finally, imaging. acceptable as well, I guess, for the most part. I really didn't find that it had any difficulty in you know, distinguishing where instruments were placed, unless it was a really busy track. Then maybe a little bit. One of the songs that I like using to see, you know, if the IM has got, let's say, a correct timbre and tonality, is Feel So Good from Diane Reeves. And it passes that song flawlessly. It does it very nicely, although, you know, that slight laid backness that it has in its sound, a little bit extra energy would have been welcomed, and it wouldn't be that it would break the whole harmony that it has, that it was basically creating. Okay. As compared then to the IMs that are here, well, you know, I'll start here with the NX7 first. The biggest flaw of the NX7 is, even though they have made major improvements on this one compared to the previous generations, you still notice a little bit that BA timbre, that BA tonality, that piezo tonality. And at lower volumes, it's very nice. I would say that the lower volumes, it's perhaps even a little bit more engaging than the Cinno because of that extra energy that it has. But the Cinno only really comes alive when you start pushing the volume. When you push the volume, then things kind of balance each other out. You know, in terms of the bass, the mids, and the treble, they kind of balance each other out, and that's where it becomes, let's say, more satisfying. While this one, as you raise the volume, bass and mids for the most part maintain themselves composed, but upper mids and treble then become a little bit overly energetic. So overall, you know, although this is a nice IM, like I mentioned before, and I think it's a very capable IM, and in terms of its accessories, it is very much worthwhile. The Cinno does, you know, slightly outperform it in overall sound, in the overall presentation that it gives. Obviously, this will be an interesting deal if you can get it for the reduced price that I've seen. Like, I've seen it as low as $89, especially considering that, you know, that brings some nice tips, and the cable is a pretty decent cable. I think it would be worthwhile considering as well. It's also got another party trick, which is the fact that the nozzles are exchangeable, and that does change as well the sound profile. Compared to the EPZ K5, the K5 it's got a kind of a neutralish sound, and at lower volumes it is more capable than the Cinno. True, it is more capable. It doesn't need a lot of power to get it going. But as you raise the volume, then that area there of 5K, 4.5 to 6K can become a little bit over enthusiastic, and on some songs you do notice a little bit of sharpness, a little bit of I wouldn't really say that it's become similar, but it becomes just intense enough for you to say, okay, let me lower the volume just a knob here or two. Okay, so overall, well, in terms of its accessories as well, it is very well accessorized. It's got a, you know, this is not the stock cable. This is one of the new cables that they now have, which is the DP. I believe this is the DP12. But the stock cable is a modular cable. It also brings some nice tips. It brings a nice case. So when you consider all those things, and it's $114, the price difference in terms of accessories does make it a very interesting proposition. And sound-wise, although the Cinno does slightly edge it out, it is not a monumental difference that you would say, no, okay, the Cinno is definitely a better option. No, I wouldn't say that. I would say ultimately that you would have to listen carefully and see what you know, what basically floats your boat. I mean, this was not as to me to not recommend this one is a little bit harder than on the NX7. Okay, so that's those two out of the way, which leaves us then with these two, which are, well, for me the ones that make the most sense. And why do they make the most sense? I'll tell you why. Well, with regards to the SiMGOT, the comparison here, I would say more that they are side grades, because the SiMGOT's got way more detail up top, way more energy. You know, the bass, I would say the bass on the Cinno slightly edges out the bass on the SiMGOT, but the SiMGOT, in terms of the mids, the upper mids and treble, is more detailed. It gives you a bigger sense of polish to the sound. It makes it more mature sounding, and because it's also a more brighter sounding IM comparatively. I'm not going to say that there's an outright winner or loser here, but I'm going to say that these two are more rather side grades to each other. Okay, some people complained about how bright the EM6L was, and in that case, because in terms of bass presentation they are very similar to each other, although graphically it doesn't look like it, I would say that maybe then the Cinno would make sense under those conditions. So if you think that it's bright, then this would be the perfect IM. All right, although like I said, it doesn't have the same extension up top in terms of the twinklies and the sparkles that the EM6L has. And then finally, you have the CCA, the Rhapsody. And the CCA Rhapsody, okay, fine. It sounds really, really good, and we'll get that into a second. But the Rhapsody's got a $50 price tag. $50 price tag. It's got the tuning switches. It is just a better IM. That's it. Just based on those two facts. Even if, well, obviously the sound has got to be important. But even if the sound wasn't as good as it is, the fact that it costs $50, the fact that it's equally as well built, okay, fair enough, maybe not ergonomically doesn't fit as nice because it's a big shell, but it's very well built. And the two tuning options that I have selected here, which is all the switches up, or then the first two up and the next two down, they provide you such variety, such versatility in terms of the sound that you get, that it's very hard. Honestly, it is very, very hard for any IEM, not only at this price, but at even higher prices, to outright be justified as beating the Rhapsody. You know, if I was just recently in my review of the PR3 maybe hard on KZ, and you know, I guess I could have been maybe a little bit more tame in the way that I presented things, but the reality was what it was. Okay, this is the complete opposite. You know, this is what I know that KZ is capable of doing. KZ is capable of taking something which, if it had a different brand right in here, you know, you wouldn't pay $50 for it. You would have paid $150 for it easily. If this said he has something else other than CCA or KZ, you would have paid $150 for this, and still you would be happy, and you would probably say, wow, what a great IM. So in terms of the price and the performance that you get, this is outright the best IM out of all of them. In terms of sound, well, this is an IM that if you like the switches and if you like playing around the switches, that the versatility that it offers does make it more competitive as well in terms of its sound to the Cinno. It isn't as dark sounding as a Cinno in either one of the settings that I mentioned, the all switches up or the first two up and the other two down. It's a significantly brighter sounding IM, very easy to drive, but that brightness, although its only real flaw, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, is the fact that it sometimes sounds a little bit artificial. That brightness conveys a sense of grandeur, a sense of space, a sense of size to the whole IM's presentation, which is very, very engaging. And you know, I have to be honest, you know, if I had to choose between this and the Cinno, I would choose the Rhapsody. Honestly, I genuinely would choose the Rhapsody. The Cinno is a very nice IM, and if the Rhapsody didn't exist, then I would say that the Cinno and the EM6L would be the two ones that would stand out, at least in this small group here of the cheaper hybrids, let's put it that way. One being a warmer sounding one, the other one being a more detailed, a more polished sound, let's put it that way, while this is more organic, more old school kind of sounding. Okay, but the Rhapsody exists, and and it throws a wrench into the whole thing. You know, it just makes it very difficult to say, okay, I'm going to choose the Cinno or I'm going to choose the EM6L over the Rhapsody because what reasons am I going to give, you know? Anyway, guys, like I said, this is a nice IM. It is well tuned. It's got a nice organic old school type of tuning. Not the most detailed, okay, but sufficient and adequate for its price tag. It is, I think, not a polar opposite, but an IM that, if I compare it specifically here with the EM6L, would be the IM that those that like the EM6L for the majority of its presentation and only pointed out at its perhaps excessive, not excessive, but it's over energy in the upper registers as being a flaw, then this will be the perfect one. As compared to the NX7 and the EPZ, the issue here is how those two scale at specific parts of the frequency compared to this. So if you're a low volume listener, I would say that this and the EPZ do have a place. But if you like listening to music a little bit louder, or if you like things which are a little bit more energetic, a little bit more high energy, then this will definitely be the better choice. And by high energy, I don't necessarily mean electronic music. You can, you know, if you like a lot of stuff which has got a lot of trumpets, a lot of saxophones, a lot of stuff which can get very energetic at certain parts, then definitely this is the wiser choice. I mean, something like Jeff Ryan's Up and Up on here sounds perfect. You can crank it up and it doesn't really bug you. On here, once you reach a certain volume level, you start saying, okay, let me bring it down. And the same thing goes for the EPZ. And trust me, I like both of these IEMs, okay? That's it, guys. Show you now quickly the graph and we'll wrap it up. All right. Hi guys, and welcome now to the graph section for the ZIIGAAT Cinno. This is the graph of the Cinno, obviously, as you can see. And like I mentioned, in terms of the bass, it's very well executed. I mean, it's got a nice sub-bass focus. It just glides into the mid-bass, no bleeding to the mids. I mean, it's basically flat there by just over 200 hertz. It's basically flat, and it maintains itself nice and flat. And this area here is where there's that slight recess which affects especially the female vocals. So it kind of maintains itself flat until 2, and then at 2K it kind of shoots up for that pin again, which peaks at about 3 and then carries on through. This is a coupler related peak and non-coupler related peak, and then extension past 10K. And just by looking at this part here of the graph, you would say to yourself, oh, okay, this must have a great soundstage. And the soundstage isn't bad, it's just small, that's all. It is just small. It lacks a little bit that sense of air, okay? The nice thing about the Cinno is that everything sits within a nice tight window of operation. So we're talking about 77 to 85, so about 8 dBs, okay, which is nice. The bass doesn't overshadow the upper mids, and you know, so it kind of maintains itself nicely balanced. It is really, honestly, only this part here, which you know, it's not an issue, but on some songs you do notice that it's just missing a little bit extra info here, and missing this little extra info here does kind of, like I said, just recess things slightly. All right. Anyway, that's the Cinno. First one I'm going to show you is the SiMGOT, the EM6L. And the EM6L, well, I've normalized everything at 1K. And the interesting thing about this is that, well, first of all, it's an 8mm versus a 10mm. The way that I've normalized it here doesn't exactly correspond to what I hear 100%. And I'll tell you why. In terms of the mids and upper mids and treble, yes, it's precisely this. There's no recess in the mids of the EM6L. It's got plenty of detail. It's just, I've always found the EM6L to have great mids. The extension past 10K is perhaps the place where you can say that, okay, it would be nice if there was a little bit more twinklies and sparklies, but that's me. Some people did say that it was overly bright. Some people even complained about it having too much bass. On the other hand, like I was saying, the bass doesn't, there isn't this difference in terms of the bass. I would say that in terms of the bass, if I was to try and, you know, graphically put them, you know, show you how it kind of sounds, I would say the bass sounds like if I normalized it at about 400 hertz. If I normalize it at about 400 hertz, that's how the bass sounds. And even though there's still this difference, you mustn't forget, there's the fact that one is an 8mm and the other is a 10. So displacement, okay? Anyway, the EM6L, like I said, does sound more open, more detailed, okay? And I would ultimately say that the EM6L is more of a option for those that like the more brighter sound, while the Cinno is an option for those that like the more warmer sound, okay? That's it. Okay, so that's that out of the way. The next one I'm going to show you now, actually let me just change here the color to something which stands out a little bit more, make it green here. Yes, green is good. This is the NX7, the Mark IV, and the NX7. Let me just quickly take away the Cinno. The NX7, the Mark IV, the graph on its own, I think looks really, really good. It really does. It's not offensive. Nice sub-bass focus. Again, almost flat by 300 Hz. There's no real bleed, nothing. Pin again, picks at 2, and then nicely starts going down. There's this peak here, which is coupler related and non-coupler related. Definitely the piezo is and the BA is handling the highs, and the piezo are responsible for this. And then extension. On graph, on paper, it looks absolutely fantastic, honestly. The problem is that it's not the mid-bass. The mid-bass here is similar. This part here, you do notice that there's more forwardness in the female vocals. It's just the timbre and the tonality of the Mark IV, especially when you start cranking the volume, shows itself. And it just spoils an otherwise very, very engaging presentation. Okay, if they just polished up this a little bit, obviously they're not going to launch a Mark V. Would be interesting, but they're not. They just polish that up a little bit. No, if you're a low volume listener, the Mark IV does edge out the Cinno. It does. There's just a lot of more detailed retrieval. There's a lot more atmosphere, more twinklies, more sparklies. Okay, so that's that Mark IV out of the way. The next one now is the EPZ. Let me change the color of the EPZ. Let's make it red, so it stands out. The EPZ, bass wise, there's a definite advantage of the Cinno in terms of the bass. But the interesting thing is that although you can also see that there's a very relaxed pin again on the EPZ. The problem with the EPZ is this area here. Okay. It's this area which, when you actually look at it, you think to yourself, okay, but that doesn't seem like a real issue there. This part here of 4.5 to 6K stands out way more than what the graph would lead you to believe. Okay, let me put it that way. And so when you start cranking the volume, this is the area that kind of starts coming up and telling you, listen, you know what, lower the volume a little bit. So that's the only real problem there. Okay. And now finally, let me just first put the Rhapsodies, the two graphs up. Okay, so like I said, they graphed almost identical, and that's why I actually decided to do it like this, because it would be easier for me to actually go back and forth. The one which is the purple one, okay, this is the one that has all the switches up. So we've got this tuck, which is basically flat by 200. And then you can see as well that the descent after the pin again at 3 is a little bit more accentuated. The one in the blue is the one that doesn't have that, is the one that has only the first 2 switches up, another 2 down. So you are straight away boosted across the whole thing in terms of mid bass and a little bit more sub bass, although you don't really notice the difference. So you notice is that this part here gets a lot more, let's say, guts, a lot more cojones, if you want to put it in that manner. And yes, it is nice that it gets that extra energy, because it does give it a little bit more slam, a little bit more impact. There is some bleeding to the mids, but that bleeding to the mids actually helps then counteract this area here, which is also boosted. Okay, and this area here, by being boosted, and we're talking about, I mean, some of the other IEMs before we saw, like I mentioned on the Cinno, we're talking about 8 dBs. But yeah, the CCA, we're talking, oh my God, sorry about that. On the CCA, we're talking about a gain which goes 77. There's 11 dBs. Okay, so that's quite a bit. That's really quite a bit. Anyway, compared in the Rhapsody with the Cinno, and let me put up the Cinno here. Okay, all of them, like I said, normalized at 1K. And let's start with the version which has got the extra mid bass first. Okay, so this is the version that's got the extra mid bass, and it's obvious that it's got way more slam, way more impact, but it's an overly emphasized slam. So it's definitely a more V-shaped, a more colored sound as compared to the Cinno, which has got this more correctness in its sound, this more kind of you know, it's actually interesting, and I'll show you the graph in a second. The Cinno, by the way that it graphs, reminds me very much of the ISN H50, and I'll show you the graph now in a second before we finish. And if it just had a little bit more mid bass, just a smidge more mid bass, it would kind of make up for the fact that this here is slightly recessed. Because that's the thing on the H50 that actually captivates you and then surprises you. You would think that, you know, it's got more mid bass, it's going to make it even worse. No, it actually improves it somehow. But anyway, on the Rhapsody, because that's what we have here. This version, which is the one that emphasizes the mid bass, it's got a lot more energy. The rest here, yes, noticeably more energetic. It's like, look, it's as simple as this. The Rhapsody is going to be a more colored sound, a sound that I think will please more people, will satisfy more people, and then coupled to the fact that you have those switches that can adjust it, will just be overall more satisfying. The Cinno is a more mature tuned IM. It will have a crowd that will appreciate it for what it is. Okay, so that's compared to the version which has got the more mid bass, and then compared to the version which has got the quicker, the earlier tuck, the one that's more sub bass focused. Surprisingly, compared to this one, they start sounding more similar. One of the main reasons as well is the fact that the PENON gain is slightly reduced. It's not as, it's basically 10 dBs as opposed to just over 11 on the one that boosts the mid bass. And then, because, I mean, fine, fair enough, this is an 8mm, this is a 10, so in reality this is not this huge difference. They actually sound a lot closer than what this graph would lead you to believe in this part of the spectrum. Again, yes, it's a much easier IM to drive, and so there's a lot more energy up top, and technically as well, it creates a more realistic sense of that, of soundstage, of more, not more realistic, but a more grander sense of soundstage, of size and so on, although it can on certain occasions be a little bit overly emphasized. It can be a little bit fake, for lack of a better word. Anyway, let me just quickly show you the ISN like I was mentioning. Let me do away this and fetch here the ISN, because my mistake, I erased it. ISN, where are we? There we go. ISN H50, there we go. Okay, there we go. See? And now let's normalize this. That's it. It's actually very, very interesting how the Cinno and the ISN, the H50, have got such a similar way of doing the mids, the upper mids, and the treble. Very, very similar. The difference is, like I said, this extra mid bass, significant amount of extra mid bass compared to the Cinno. And surprisingly, you would think that this would, like I said earlier, would even make this recessed sound worse, and it, for some reason, which obviously has to do with the psychoacoustic, so it actually makes this area sound not as recessed as it sounds, as it can seem graphically. And that's it. I mean, I just, you know, this was just a curiosity which I thought would be interesting to show you guys. So there you have it, guys. Cinno, an interesting IM. It's got a nice, mature, organic, old school kind of tuning. I like it. I enjoyed it. It's a satisfying listen. I'm looking on a perspective of a wider variety of people, what they would prefer. I would say that they would probably prefer something like the Rhapsody. It's probably going to be the one that will satisfy most people. And compared to the EM6L, which is the other main contender here in this group, the EM6L is the more, let's say, more technically inclined one, while this one is the more organic, musically type IM sound. All right, anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little IM of mine. As always, like and subscribe. If you have any questions you want to ask me, please feel free to do so. All right, take care now. Bye bye.